3,000,000 years from Earth, the Red Dwarf podcast, thanks for the memory. Its crew, Blake Braswell, a USA native, and Lee Malaby, his English co-host. Additional. I've realised that while producing this podcast that it mirrors my own life in that the people are real, it's the situations that are ridiculous. What's up, Smegheads, and welcome to Series 3 of Thanks for the Memory, a Red Dwarf podcast where we rewatch every episode of the BBC comedy show Red Dwarf and discuss them. I am Lee, and I am here with Blake. Hey, Blake.
Hello, everybody. What's up, all you?
I'm glad that made you giggle. I was like, you're such a better writer at this stuff with me, and I just thought, I'm trying to get off the back of what you said of like not theming those jokes to the show, but to the podcast more. And I was like, oh, then I have to do that. I was quite pleased with that one.
It's brilliant because I'm also like annoyed that I'm like, oh, I should have thought of that. That's a good one because it's so true. That's like a, I don't know if you put together the quotes of life from Red Dwarf. That would be the first one.
Yes.
That's like that might actually sum up why we like this show, to be perfectly honest. That as crazy as the show is, the people feel so real. And that's, I think, to be honest, I think we've pretty much said that several times watching it. Yeah. So that's an excellent quote.
Cool.
Speaking of ridiculous situations and real people, we are talking Series 3, Episode 5, Timeslides, which originally aired on December 12th, 1989.
So there you go. That goes off the back of the last episode that I said last episode might have been the last episode that aired in December because we sometimes take a break in the UK. Obviously not, because the next one came out a week after this one as well. So they didn't really, they took a break. It was literally over the Christmas break.
That's right. Season 3 will end the streak of Red Dwarf from the 80s. And then we'll kick off with the 90s. Interestingly enough, so obviously it's about to be 1990, just a few weeks after this episode, and then the next series is 91.
Interesting.
I looked ahead at the timelines, at the dates as I was looking ahead. So
I wonder if we will notice a difference in kind of the overall, because the 80s and the 90s were a very different era. It'll be interesting to see if we notice that 90s influence moving forward.
I would say, as we've talked about the difference of this series, how I said this starts to bridge the gap into what the era of Red Dwarf I remember more in 4, 5, and 6. First two series feel very 80s.
Yes.
And then this starts to get a little bit of that 90s where there's almost like, for lack of a better term, there's also like a little theatricality in like the film theater sense. Yeah. It was creeping into some of the stuff that's in the show. But this is it. This rounds out the 80s and rounds out these two episodes, 5 and 6, round out my least knowledge until we get to the very recent stuff for Red Dwarf, and we're coming into the spot that I know better.
Okay.
In this particular episode, for its ridiculousness that's happening around it, the developing fluid that Crichton uses to process old photographs mutates, and the photographs come alive. The Red Dwarf crew find that they can go into the photograph, and Lister finds that the photographs allows him to go back in time, and he plans on changing history so he doesn't end up marooned in deep space.
Interesting.
Well, so, one of the first things I researched on my second viewing, when is the first digital camera?
Yes.
Because this thing definitely leans on, speaking of the 80s, a concept that is completely foreign. And to me, this whatever you want to call this, that they do, this anachronistic, but like reversed anachronism, where you're bringing in stuff that you feel like, why would this still be in the future, happens from the very beginning. Our opening gag, whatever you want to call it, as a lot of times Red Dwarf tends to do, there's like a little opening, as it's stepping into the middle of something. And I love that Kat's golf outfit from Better Than Life shows back up as they're playing that little miniature golf game on the table,
which looks great.
And that when Kat scores or sinks the hole, he goes to a very 80s tape deck and boombox to play the crowd cheering for him after he sinks the putt.
Yes.
And my wife just goes, "That's a very 80s type boombox." And I was like, we talked about how there was a few episodes ago. It was the murder mystery that wasn't a murder mystery one. I'm forgetting the name, but where they find the black box.
Thanks for the memory.
Oh, thanks for the memory. Right. With this podcast.
Wow, Blake.
Yeah. Right. I should have been able to pull that one out. But like, remember how we both were like, whoa, they took a moment to do an insert shot of this quote unquote cool high tech black box they did. And now it's like the reverse where you could have made, like, even when they do the talkie toaster, it's got this thing on the side that makes it quote unquote a future toaster. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But this boombox looks like it just transported from like 85. It's funny what they choose to like do.
Futurize, yeah.
Yeah, because they probably weren't getting the audio from the tape deck. That's probably dubbed over, I guess. But so why not? I don't know. Why not have a little thing that's like,
I think it could have been anything.
Yeah, like that you would just tag it. Like, I was going to say talkie boombox, but I guess that's redundant. But like, I just think it's funny that like that's,
Yeah, some of the things they realize that it's futuristic, and they've tried to make it's like the triangular video cassette from Better Than Life. Mm-hmm. So little things like that, but yet a lot of the other stuff they didn't think beyond. Like, where would the world be in 3 million, or not even necessarily 3 million years time, I guess. It's weird. Like,
I mean, because CDs were cutting edge in '89, I do believe. I feel like, am I crazy?
Don't know. We did have mini discs. I guess mini discs would have been around about that time. No, CDs. That's interesting, actually.
Well, now thanks to the power of our future, Google, compact disc first released to the public in 1982.
Wow. I didn't
in
get my
1981, the BBC program Tomorrow's World introduced the CD to British audiences.
Yes, I remember Tomorrow's World.
So Born in the USA was the first CD released in the United States in 84. So like by 89, even if it's not a compact disc player in everybody's home,
they're still about.
Like tapes are not on the way out.
Yeah.
Which there's an easy fix for this. In like, why do you have that antiquated, the way a kid would, be about a record player, even though now records are cool again, or an 8-track. Like, why do you have that? There'd be some guy, but why do you have that? And Lister be like, well, it's the only way I can listen to the music I wrote, because he's got all these, like, I don't know, bootleg.
That makes sense, actually.
Or whatever. I don't know. I'm probably thinking about it too much, but it did just strike me, because also the boombox has like a very prominent, it's just featured on that table so strong, and it's like it just cracked me up.
It makes you realize how much the world has changed since our childhood, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. And we'll just even see that, like, Bruce Springsteen 84 is when he released a CD in the US, like, okay. And I remember, did you guys have, boy, we're gonna have to have the 80s throwback podcast later. Did you have, I think they were, one of them was called Columbia House here, where it was like, pay a penny and get like 6 CDs or whatever.
It was Britannia Music Club. It's like a monthly subscription thing. You paid so many and you could get so many CDs or whatever. It was cassette still when I was a member of it.
That's how I got my early collection of CDs. Was we did like 2 different versions of those, and that's how I got. My first one was John Bon Jovi's Young Gun 2 soundtrack, just in case you're wondering, with Blaze of Glory on it. That's right.
I didn't get my first CD player until I was about 15. So what was that, 1990? Yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah, but that's what I mean. So even though it wouldn't have been everybody's home, it is funny that, and I'd be interested to see once we get to season 4, because now there will have been like, I think, a year and a half between production or something like that.
To see what advances we're going to see. Yeah,
like do they play with the future stuff more? Yes. Or, and how? Now let me just give. Can you tell we don't have we think we don't have a ton to talk about this actual episode itself? I will give a shout out to a contemporary show, which is Star Trek: The Next Generation to this.
Okay.
Because it's funny. As a kid, I loved Star Wars and didn't really care for Star Trek, because I would watch these Star Trek episodes and I'd be like, the tech looks so dumb to me.
Yeah.
Whereas like in Star Wars, I like everything's clunky and chunky and flicks and switches and, But then in Star Trek, it was all this like, this is just a a plastic tablet they're holding and pretending to look at screens on and stuff like that. And then what's wild is to watch. We did a rewatch of Next Generation a few years ago, my wife and I had to stop partway through like the third episode and went, as a kid, it had just remembered that I hated the technology in Star Trek because I thought it looked so hokey. And instead, this show looks more correct now than ever because they were like, we're going to get rid of switches and flicks and buttons and it's touchscreen. And you're like, what? I mean, like, and granted, like, they don't it doesn't live up to like the newest Star Trek where they can really, do the CGI of what's on the screen and stuff. But like, it's, you don't even think about it. It took like 3 or 4 episodes for me to like even remember it because it just looks right. They're walking around with what looks like an iPad and yada, yada and all that. And that came out at the same time as this. Anyway.
Interesting.
Exactly.
No, that's interesting. That's got to have been, it's got to be a budgetary thing, surely. Like Star Trek will have had a much bigger budget than like Star Trek The Next Generation, just even by its cast alone, will have had a much bigger budget than Red Dwarf would have done.
Oh, sure. But they got away with cheap stuff too. But like, hey, well, in the future, we think people just hold little tablet screens that do things. So you know what? They just always hold them like this and you never see the other side of it.
Yeah, fair enough.
Like,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They did plenty of their own cheap stuff too, But this is like, he's going to hit the thing. It just feels like someone's like, hey, grab the grip who builds the set, Scenic, who's got his tape deck over there. Just grab that real quick and put it on the table.
Well, as an interesting, I'm sure we've discussed this already. When this saw episode 1, the end, do we know what year that takes place?
Didn't we find this out?
I'm sure we must have done at some point, but I don't know.
I feel like we figured this out because they say something. I think
2077 according to Google AI.
So that's the first. That's episode 1, and then we go through a million years in the future.
Yes. So
I forget, there was some line that got said where you could do the math on it and go backwards.
Okay. So that's what, like 50 years in the future.
Yeah, there's nothing like watching the original animated Transformers film that the famous one for Optimus Prime dying in the first time. Oh yeah. And like it starts off the year 2005, the Autobot Century Moon.
Well, it's and you only have to look at like Soundwave and Sound Blaster that are cassette tapes, and it's like, no, they wouldn't be nowadays. They'd be like a Bluetooth speaker, wouldn't they?
Yeah, like what are you? I'm a USB chip. Like that's. Oh my God! Well,
anyway.
there's clearly juice in that. We need to, that'll be once we're done with Red Dwarf. That's gonna be our podcast.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in and say so. It's again, as you know, we've talked about Annie. It's something that I've been keeping an eye on of the pattern of Red Dwarf episodes. Of each 2 episodes that we watch seem to fall into the pattern of first episode, big sci-fi concept. Second episode has a sci-fi concept, but is a much more smaller episode. I don't know whether you agree, but I feel that these 2 episodes fall into that pattern again.
Yeah. I mean, certainly the next one's premise is rooted in sci-fi, but it's a much more personal story.
Yes, and I think that it seems to have followed that pattern right from the start. It's really interesting.
Well, what's interesting is this episode almost reverses the trend and makes a much more personal story because
it does.
The opening scene, and I wrote this down. I said, I actually love that we have leaned back into how miserable the life is for Lister.
Yes.
Right. And instead of just being like, oh, this sucks and I'm bored, he looks genuinely depressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. At the whole thing. And I love Rimmer's line after Lister explains how much it just hates everything, and then Rimmer's like, "You're unhappy, aren't you?" And the audience laughs because the way he delivers, "You're unhappy, aren't you?" Like he's discovering it. But I actually wrote down, it's funny that they laugh because he legitimately seems to mean it. And he's got a few in this episode that Rimmer has where if you didn't know him, I don't think it would strike you as funny, but he's genuinely being sincere. And I honestly can't quite tell if they thought it would be funny or if it was being sincere. Does that make sense?
Because it's trying to show that Rimmer is completely oblivious to how Lister's being, that this feels like it's the first time he's realized that he's potentially suicidal.
Right, which like has its own like, how did you miss the fact this dude is just miserable?
Yeah.
But then it's the way he sits down and like, it's like it would work with a kid, right? Like if he was sitting there saying it to like an 11-year-old who was sad, you'd be like, hey, what a good dude. I don't know. It struck me as funny because he does deliver it so sincerely. And it's odd that the show it starts off with almost like Rimmer is the one who's like just accepted how things are.
Yeah.
And like we should move forward. And in some healthy way, and Lister isn't, and then the show completely reverses that like concept. Although really, it's about not being alone as opposed to changing his life as much for Rimmer. I feel like. Yeah,
because it's interesting that I feel like this is the first episode we've had in a while where it is that thing where he hasn't. It's time. Like, is this it? Is this what I have? Is this the rest of my life now? And we need to do something about it, because it seems for the longest time, like I think you've said it a couple of times when we've recorded recently, they've just accepted that this is it now, and this is the first time we've actually sort of delved into like, is this it? I need something to happen, because this can't be the rest of my life.
Right, and I feel like I look forward to getting to season 4 because I feel like there's more of a, all right, you know what? This is life now. So what are we doing? What are we doing today, guys? What are we working on? And there's hijinks that get created by like trying to solve a fresh food problem and things like that, that feel like, just speaking of Star Trek, like a Star Trek episode in the sense of, here's a self-contained problem and it doesn't have the overall problem. And this gets back to the overall problem, which, we talked about with series 2, where they can go back in time to Red Dwarf at a specific moment through the stasis leak.
Stasis leak. Yeah, I couldn't think of what it was called there for a second.
So we've played with it, and I think we talked about stasis leak. I feel like we mentioned some things that could come forward from this episode. Now, I remember this episode as a kid thinking it was absolutely hysterical and that the concept was hysterical.
Yeah.
And I think part of what's hard for me is like when we get to, Crichton dancing around and developing the film, it is so hard. It was so hard to divorce myself from knowing how digital photography and things work now. I mean, like your iPhone is automatically set to capture a little bit of video when it takes a picture. You know what I mean? Like,
no, because I'm an Android person, but okay.
Well, the live photos, whatever they call them. But like, it's just an odd. The moment that he's like, "What is going on?" is so less. It's hard. You can't capture that right now as you could in the 89 or 90 watching this and be like, oh, whoa, what's going on with the photographs? You know what I mean?
All you found out is that Crichton's managed to tap into, so the rest of them are muggles, and Crichton's just realised that he's not. He's a wizard.
That's true. It's true. It is kind of like the wizard newspapers. Totally. Yeah. And wizard newspapers for me, I'll have that problem too, because the internet existed when Potter came out, but like by the time you get to like 99 or 2000, whenever the first film came out, and then so a couple years later you get the newspapers with that on it, and you're just like, this doesn't look like magic. Like it just looks like
the internet now.
Yeah, it's just the internet now.
It's just Google's homepage.
Yeah. It's like, oh, cool. You've got a this newspaper that does it, so you kill trees, but for yours. But like, it is kind of an odd moment that doesn't have the impact. It's a funny one to go back and watch. It's charming in that respect. Here you've got this android who is a living, breathing, AI creature. Well, maybe not breathing, but walking around, self-aware, and he's developing
photos.
Yeah, and photos of old photos of him from the Nova 5 having a birthday.
There was one, what photos is he developing? Because there was one of like a moped or a motorbike sort of driving down, and whose photos are these?
One thing I took it, they don't say it, but on the second view, and I was like, I wonder if this is like, he's just trying to fill his time. And he's going through like belongings of crew, right? And finding
that makes sense.
Film and stuff to be developed.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And anybody that, I was born in 1980, so like I get all this, but you just gotta love anybody who's like, I don't know, born in the 2000s that potentially could be listening to this and doing a rewatch. And the idea of like, you sent your camera, your film off. You don't know what photo you had? Like,
I missed that.
There was like an excitement, right? Where you'd finally be like, oh man, that was the last shot on this roll. I don't remember everything I took. Well, we'll send this off.
That's it. Because it's like, you had 24 exposures on a film, and you had to make sure that every photo you took was, you had to, or at least the best you could, because you didn't get to see it when you took it like you do now and go, I'll take that one again because it's a bit blurry. It's like, it was what it was.
Yeah, you'd have like, 48 photographs and go, oh, that's a good one.
Yeah, oh, my finger was over that one, bugger. And that was half the fun of seeing how many you got out of the ones you sent off that were actually usable.
Yeah, and you forgot about what they were. It was like, who knows?
It's fun. Like, let's be honest now. Who goes on vacation now, or holiday, sorry, all our British listeners, I'm talking to Blake, I've gone into American mode. So you go on holiday and you take like 1 million photographs and then never look at them again.
Yeah. Yeah, man. Like this is not sponsored by Apple, but the little Apple memories that the photo Apple do for you just every now and then, it'll be like, a collection of photos from 2 years ago where you were in the woods hiking with your daughter, and you're like, oh, thank God this did this, because would I have...
Yes.
Like, when...
Google does the same.
Yeah, like, it put it together for me.
Yeah.
And it's which, to be nostalgic was part of the fun of, like, I found a bunch of photo books as I was unpacking here. And I'm like, oh, yeah, cool. Like, you take the time to do all that stuff.
And that's it.
And in this episode that takes place 3 million years in the future... like, is making me nostalgic for developing film. I thought this episode had more to it.
It was on. I alluded to this when we before we started recording, that my third viewing of this, I think, was a viewing too much.
Yeah,
because it kind of. Not necessarily bad. I did enjoy the episode, but it takes a long time to set the episode up, and then it just kind of ends. Like, it's weird. It just felt like it was, all right, we've got the premise. We're going to use it to affect our future, and then it's kind of over.
Yeah, it does. It just ends. Some of these feel very packed. And once they discover the Timeslides, that, every one of these photos, because of mutated developing fluid, which, God, I love that. Like, it evolved, it made like a time travel thing that you could walk into. Yeah. I also love, on second viewing, I was like, why did Lister walk into the photograph? Like, there's no reason for him to go do that.
Well, I know.
But and I think the idea is an effect that if you were doing it now, it's that he would walk up and be like, this is amazing. Like, look at this right here. And then his finger would go through it a little bit, go, what? And then he'd step through, but obviously they couldn't do it there. So it's just weird that he walks at full speed. I see what you're saying.
Yes.
Basically to a wall.
Yeah, because he doesn't know what's going to happen. No. They know the photos are moving, but they haven't established that you can go into the... I never caught on that at all.
Yeah, it's just weird that he just, for no reason, he walks into it. And again, I think, in a something with more of a budget, you'd be like, this is crazy. You'd lean on it or whatever and go, whoa, I can go in, because it's like, that's the crazy part. The crazy part almost isn't the being able to view things from the past. It's the insanity of like being able to like to step into it.
It's a really cool effect though when he does it. I really like how that effect works when they walk into the photo. It's really well done.
And when he comes out of it is really good. I had to watch that twice. Like, that's really clean. Like,
it's really well done.
I do think it's funny that when they come out of visiting Lister's young self, the steps they walk on, the audio from walking on those steps to come back into the ship is so loud, and the steps are like this. They're like bumping up and down. Watch that again and be like, my God, could they not afford just like 2 pieces of wood to stand like and paint it? Like, it looks like that thing's gonna fall apart, and it's loud, and you get the loudness from the set. It's very funny. I didn't catch it on the first go around. I caught it on the second go around. You're just like,
yeah, before we get into the episode, there is something I need to discuss. The MacGuffin of this episode, right? The tension sheet.
Oh.
What the hell is it, right? Because they're just like, oh, it's just that packing paper stuff. For a start, packing paper, I've never heard to it referred to as packing paper, because it's not paper, it's plastic, but whatever, bubble wrap, right?
Right.
Painted red. What is it? I know it's never said in this episode. I don't know whether it's ever established what the tension sheet, what its purpose is.
Well, it's supposed, as they say in the episode, it is a first used in 1961. By the way, thank you, Google. Is when it first came out. So I don't know how that falls in this timeline, but I mean, they just say, because at the time, it's one of those things that of its time period, I remember there's a time you only got styrofoam peanuts. And then there was a switch over in the 80s where you started to get bubble wrap on stuff that was shipped to you, right?
Ah.
And if you think about it, we didn't get stuff shipped to us as much as we do now. This is a pre-Amazon age, right? If you got stuff shipped to you, it's kind of a big deal. Not a big deal, but like, it just... anything's, bigger than an envelope. Like, it's not something that happened all the time. Whereas like today, like, I don't know, I got Amazon boxes coming today and then 2 more days because my daughter's birthday is in a few days. And so like, and I at the time, in the context of the show, like, bubble wrap was like a big, it would come in, I'd be like, oh, as a kid, and I'd want to sit there and pop them all. So, I mean, I think that's the people's enjoyment of, because it was one of those things that, right, there's no internet. And at some point, people have to understand when this, oh, you do this too? Or you get the bubble wrap and everybody starts to understand, oh, we all like to do this. Like, we all pop the bubble wrap. And so I think the idea of the tension is just you focus on it, you pop it, and then you paint it red, which I don't understand how that's supposed to relax you more. And then it has tension sheet written on it, which, I mean, is so dumb that it is brilliantly crypto-fascist, as young young Lister says.
So I've just Googled it, and I can't believe I feel so dumb now for asking the question that I've just asked. So on reddwarf.fandom.com/wiki/tension sheet, it says the tension sheet, and they even say it. So it's painted red when Rimmer goes to see his younger self. He's like, why is it painted red? Someone comments that it's like a calming colour, which it isn't, because red's the exact opposite.
He says that to Thicky Holden.
Yeah. I thought it was. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's painted red because, according to Rimmer, it's a calming colour, right? But you've just said it there as well. So according to that wiki, the tension sheet was a stress relief aid invented by Fred Thicky Holden. So it's what they've done is take bubble wrap, like you said, that's what everyone does with it anyway, and it's basically the fidget spinner of 3 million years ago.
That, I was thinking a fidget spinner, but my brain also had those. Now it's the reusable sheet. You've seen the silicone
Yes,
poppets
we've got a few of them in our house. Yes, I have a Squid Game one.
My daughter loves, she got a unicorn one that you can just throw back there on a long trip, and she loves it. So like...
yeah. Makes sense. Tension. It's called a tension sheet. It's literally all there for us to figure out. And I had to ask the question.
Well,
now I feel dumb.
I think it's a valid question because it is kind of like...
It's never specifically said, but then the first time you see Lister with it, that's what he's doing.
Yeah.
Because he's stressed, he's popping the tension sheet. So it's all there. I was apparently just too dumb to figure it out.
Well, but it is weird in that it just shows up out of nowhere, and it's this major plot point for the show.
Yeah.
Like
what they should have done again, but I wonder if it'll show up again, and I don't mean as a plot point, just as something in the background, or like Kat and Rimmer are talking and Lister's in the background popping the tension sheet. I wonder if it will show up in the future as a thing.
Oh.
Because then that comes down to talking about the potential, like we have before, of when these episodes were recorded and what order they were meant to go out in, rather than the order that they did go out in. So maybe the tension sheet is in future episodes, but those were originally planned to come out before this one, so it's a thing, but now we're actually going to base something on it.
Well, I mean, this show does have future call forwards as they go, we've got a time machine and we could go this, we could do that. And Crichton says, we could go back to Dallas in the 60s and go on the grassy knoll and yell duck. And it's like, well, I don't know how well you remember the future episodes, Lee, but that definitely comes up later.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, good. I didn't want to get into this. I know we're rewatching in real time. I don't know. But like, that is like a plot to one of the future episodes down the road.
I don't remember that, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see if we've, like you just said, the detention sheet came out of nowhere. Maybe it didn't, or maybe it wasn't supposed to, but in the end it did.
Well, so Lister, when he walks through, as we've said, and then he gets in there with, and I love Chris Berry playing his own brother. Doing a proto Ace Rimmer voice.
Yeah, mind you, can you get out of the photo, please? We're trying to take a picture.
And then Lister gets beat up, and then he realizes he can't walk out the edge of the the picture, and so they paint and I love this because I'm like, okay, cool, you got a time machine, but you have a very specific rule.
Very specific. That's what annoys me. They go all out to tell you the parameters of how this works.
And the trick is, the first photo they show you is a wedding where they're in front of a brick, like a door and a brick wall of a church or something like that, right? So here's the problem. In the other photos that they step into, you could argue, well, they've forgotten the rules. They don't go left, but I don't know they really go left or right too bad. But
there's one of them they do.
There's depth. You know what I mean?
Could he go through that church door then, effectively, is the question.
Could they go through the church door? On the picture of the people on the mountain, could they keep going past them? Like, they don't really do a fourth dimension or whatever you want to call it, like third dimension, where there's only so far forward, because that's the only way later trips to like see Lister in the pub playing as a 17-year-old, which I love, that was played by his younger brother.
And it's so weird because I was like, I'm the one that did the trivia for this, right? And I've obviously read that, and I was watching it for my third view, and I was like, he's a terrible Lister. His accent isn't the same. He's like dead high pitched. I think they chose a really bad person to be young Lister. And then you look at the trivia and go, it was his brother. Oh, like you literally couldn't have picked anybody better.
You put it better. I think it's the age. Like if he were a little younger, like being a little more high pitched, and I don't know, 17 feels off. Like, but you know what? Better that than doing like a cheesy effect where they have to weirdly perform with themselves and stuff like that. You know?
Yeah.
I do love how much Lister, and this is cool because I think when people complain about series 1, it is we've tried to do I feel like we have done our best to look at the episodes. We'll address what might feel weird, like this episode, because we live when we live now.
Yes.
But we're doing our best to try to watch them in the context, right? That they came out, treat this thing as its own. And Lister does you love Lister, especially I feel like as subsequent episodes we're about to hit, where you really do the golden heart in the diamond in the rough kind of vibe for him.
Yeah.
Gets stronger. Like, he's a complete slob. He is a bit selfish, but he weirdly does have a strict, like, heart of gold, like, kind of conscience about himself. And I like that this episode, in a way, it's almost a shame he didn't play himself younger, because you see how much Lister's changed already.
Yeah.
And I like that. Like, you could see Lister in series 1 saying all the crap that this kid says, you know, shady, crypto fascist. Like, you know, like, you can kind of see the straight line there. And I like how this Lister's like, any of us, if we went and go back, talk to our younger selves, like, don't be an idiot. Just listen to what I'm saying.
But I love how he comes over, oh, this is younger me. And he's like completely accepting of it within like 30 seconds.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, this is future me. All right, cool.
Yeah, he's like, okay, whatever. Like, I mean, yeah, and you almost never get the vibe whether, like, he really believes it or he's just they're there listening to the music so he doesn't care.
Yeah.
You know, like,
maybe.
I absolutely love Brimmer Through This. Oh, that's like, do you that Ohm song? Brilliant. Don't quit your job to keep doing this.
But that's the one. So I mentioned to you before we started recording, Darren, Tracy's friend from down south, was messaging me when they were watching this, and it's like, so they're not supposed to go out the confines of the picture yet. They're stood up against the bar, which you can't see in that photo.
Yeah, you can kind of see the corner of it, so you feel like you should. Yeah, it's almost a shame that, I don't know, they didn't cheesily do some effect like. You know, I don't know. He's like I don't want to hear any more of it. And Lister's like, no, wait. And the kid gets up to walk away. And like Lister chases after him and goes bong and like into an invisible wall. You know?
Like those ones in those video games everyone complains about where it looks like you should be able to go full open world, but you can't.
Doesn't it feel like that's the kind of slapstick joke that would happen?
Yes.
In this? Yeah.
Yeah. And that would have been funny, actually.
You do feel like, if you step through there and you sat in this cafe or wherever and you talk to someone long enough, you'd almost forget.
Yeah,
and then they get up and walk away and...
yeah, it would have been funny.
I mean, that'd be pretty funny. I mean, like, I'm even like, my brain's just like, look, I know you only got so much time for gags, but how funny would a gag be like, oh, we're back on Earth. Brilliant. I want to get a pint. A proper pint. And he's like, hey, can I have and you put like a piece of plexiglass at the edge of the bar. So he's like, like, in it. He's like, can I have like, you know, like, I want a pint. And the guy like hands it, tries to hand it to him. And it's like,
off it. Yeah. Brilliant. Like, that will be brilliant.
You know, I guess the other side of it would be to say that you can't see, but obviously he could see because he tried to. That actually would be the effect you'd want to do. Whereas like to you, the world looks like a box.
Yeah.
And you can't see the light fixtures above you. I don't know. Yeah, getting weird, but like...
That would be interesting, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's the tough thing, right? You do these big sci-fi concepts.
Yeah,
and,
of course. You know.
It is interesting. And I think Patrick Stewart has even brought up how when Red Dwarf was first introduced to him, and he introed some special things for Red Dwarf, I think, like...
Okay.
It was like, I forget what it was. It was a documentary or something, a special feature, but he talks about someone saying they're making fun of your show. And he's like, who are these people? And he's like all upset. Like, they're just like, and he goes, and then the first joke started hitting and I loved it. But he thought like they were, you know, we're just gagging on Star Trek. And he's like, no, it's its own thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, Star Trek had its own issues too, where they would do this huge leap of a concept and, you know, they'd probably try more than Red Dwarf, obviously, to go, let's explain why we can't do everything, right? And it might be a hand-wavy thing like, the proton particles, when you go past will tear apart your DNA. We can't go, whatever. You know what I mean? And with the Red Dwarf, obviously, they're like, no, we're putting this in because it's going to be fun, a constraint, and a gag, and don't think too hard about it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, that's basically what it is. It's like, we're just a comedy show. Don't think too much.
Yeah.
We're just trying to be funny.
Don't watch this 30 years in the future on streamed where you can watch it over and over and pick it apart, please.
Yeah. The bassist and the drummer in Lister's band, Smeg and the Heads, according to trivia, were Jeff Walker and Bill Steer, members. I've never heard of them, by the way. A Liverpool grindcore band called Carcass. I feel like I need to look them up now.
That's cool, I love that bit because I remember wanting to be a famous musician. I love that whole bit. It makes me very, very happy. And I do love that his band was named Smeg and the Heads.
Yes, of course. And he was Smeg, and the drummer and the bassist were the Heads.
I wrote down we did skip one of my favorite jokes, which is, and this is the part as a kid I found friggin' hilarious. And again, I think it's in the context of when I saw this at 9 or 10. And at the time, there's no internet with tons of edgy takes or whatever on things. When you saw something about history, it was about history, right? Yeah. And so that Crichton pulls up the Nuremberg speech from Hitler as one of the time slides so that you can see Hitler talking. And then Lister drops in and starts like cracking jokes on him. He's only got one testicle and all this stuff. And it gets in a fight with him. It's friggin' brilliant. But my favorite line in there was Rimmer's, oh, look, it's the leader of the runner-ups to World War II.
Yes. 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 I must admit, we were cracked up watching that, but yeah, it's brilliant.
It's so good. And then you go, like, well, I guess 3,000, or I guess like, by 2077, if you think about it for real, instead of being 3 million years past that, like, would people get their history so like that? And then you go, well, God, it's 2024. And yeah, I actually think that absolutely could happen. Who's that guy? Oh, yeah. They were the runner-ups to that World War II thing. God, so brilliant. And I love and if you're a history nerd, when he talks about the package and who it's from, you're like, you know exactly what that is. There's a bomb in there in the briefcase.
Stauffenberg. Yeah.
Yeah. So great. Wasn't that the Tom Cruise Valkyrie movie? I feel like
I've never seen it.
Who he played.
We are really going into depth on this, way more than I expected to. We're already 40 minutes in and we're barely halfway through the episode.
We did kind of went on a tangent for a little bit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I think instinctually we didn't have as much to say about this episode because I'm going to skip ahead a little bit and tell you my rating.
Interesting.
I wrote solid 7 out of 10. And I mean that in a positive way. Like, this was a good bounce back from the previous episode that felt a little off. Yeah. And it's like, oh, we're back into hijinks. And this is a great filler is too strong of a word. That sounds too bad of an episode, but like in a season of like some good funnies and polymorphs and yada yada, and you got like, yeah, man, time slides, weird concept, boom. Oh, that was a delight. And again, we watch it for me, it was a Friday night at 11 p.m. in the States. And you're like, yeah, that was awesome. Great. I had a great time. And I will say in subsequent viewings, I probably would have said this was an 8 coming off the previous one, but I said a 7 and I mean it as a solid. Whenever people do 10, they always tend to be like, if it's not good, I give it like 7 and below. And that's not fair. 5 should be average, I guess.
Yeah. 5 is like, oh, it was good.
Yeah, and I think this is fun and solid, and I wrote that as a kid. I thought the Hitler joke was a 10 out of 10. I found that absolutely hilarious as a kid. I just think it is nice to see the cast breathe a little bit. I like the if I were a rich man that Rimmer bit.
Yeah. Like, it definitely felt much more like, I know we talked about on the last episode that they started to feel different. This one and the next one definitely felt much more like that season 1 and 2 vibe. Definitely.
And I would love to talk to the creators in the sense of, and I hope I don't have this wrong in my head because it's been a while since I've seen them, but I feel like 4 really jumps forward, and there's almost this feeling of like, I don't even think they say it or address it, but they do more things. They go on missions, and not like Star Trek missions, but just like they're giving themselves stuff to do, because I think if you didn't, you'd go nuts. Yes. And I wonder how much that mirrors the creators who are like, we have to do something other than just being in this ship, or we're going to go nuts trying to write this show.
Well, it'd just be the same thing over and over again, wouldn't it? We've kind of said that before. It would, like, there's only so much you can do.
And look at this. Another concept that gives them an excuse to not be on the ship.
Yes.
Right? And it keeps pushing. And I don't think I ever would have thought about that at first viewing, watching it. It's a much easier thing to see where you can sit down and just stream these back to back and see the pattern.
I have a question for you. Hologram related.
All right.
Right. So So Lister goes back, tells his younger self, and he's like, I'm not going to do that. It's crypto-fascist. I don't like money and possessions and all of that. But yeah, ends up still taking the tension sheet to the patent office and becoming a millionaire. And so then Rimmer goes into the picture of Lister to find out he's bought Buckingham Palace and that it crumbled down to make his driveway his new mansion. And the TV presenter, I have a couple of, we'll get there eventually. So the TV presenter, Ruby Wax. Is Ruby Wax a thing in America, or was she just an American over here? Because she was quite big in the UK in sort of the mid-80s to early 90s. Do you know who Ruby...
I didn't know who it was.
Really? Right, so she was obviously... So she is American, and she was huge over here. She did a lot of things like... I'm sure she was in the
and married to the director, right?
Yeah, Ed Bye, which was interesting. But according to the trivia, that person was supposed to be originally Graham Chapman, which I find interesting. But he died before they had a chance to film it. But
you can totally see it. Him doing a Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely... we've said before, I feel like, and we're rewatching Monty Python's Flying Circus at the moment, you can feel the influence on Red Dwarf, definitely. So yeah, Rimmer goes and tries to talk Lister into coming back, which obviously he doesn't, because the best delivery line in this whole thing of when he's like, you've got the money and the car and the house and the beautiful wife. Who's got it better, you with all of that, or me with what I've got? And then there's that slight pause. He goes, it's you, isn't it? Yeah, of course it is. I realise now when I said it. And it's just, that delivery is perfect.
I wrote that down. He pulls off that kind of joke. Those kinds of jokes.
Yeah.
Chris Berry does them so well. Even when you see the punchline, you're like, he's going to realize what he's saying, obviously.
Yeah. Brilliant.
I think the brilliance of Rimmer early on, he's like almost too much, but the show, the writers, Chris Berry, and I don't think it's an explicitly said thing as sometimes we tend to do. We get a little deep when we read into it. I don't even know if they realize they're doing it, but at first this show in the first few episodes is so broad, right? They're almost as big as the Cats craziness. Yeah. Like everybody, Lister's almost too much and Rimmer's almost too much. Remember how mad he would get at everything constantly? But as the show goes, they almost do a good way of backwards justifying like this is a put on for Rimmer to feel important, and like you're starting to see like the real Rimmer creep through more.
Yeah.
And the same thing with Lister, and it's wonderful. And this first bit is such a classic old Rimmer, this, that, rah, 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 rah. And the new Rimmer is it's you, isn't it?
Perfect. It's just the delivery is perfect. It's you, isn't it? Yeah, I see it now. Yeah. So anyway, he goes back, realizes nothing changes, and then decides to go and change it for himself by visiting his younger self and getting him to take the tension sheet to the patent office, inadvertently just reverting the timeline back to normal because Dickie Holden's there and he ends up doing it before him. But he lines the slide up and he asks Holly for a torch. Would a holographic torch illuminate things or not? Because Rimmer doesn't.
Well, in theory, if you had we haven't talked to the light bee, I think shows up next season. But the concept that he's got this light bee floating around in him, you're emitting light. Well, we're all reflecting light. I don't know if we get into the science of it, but like if the hologram is reflecting light perfectly, I guess you could get a torch, but also like...
Yeah, but would it work?
Why? So this is one of those, like, sometimes we go, why didn't they put this in? This is a reverse of why. It's a classic sitcom, quote unquote, at night and lit, where we're supposed to believe it's pitch black, but in actuality,
really
you can see. Just let him walk in there.
Yeah.
In fact, the torch, I don't even remember it once he goes up to the bed. You know what I mean?
That's true. Yeah, that's true. He uses it to go into the picture and then you don't see it again.
Yeah, you never again. You don't even need it. Just don't do it. But I wrote the same thing. Like, man, these hologram rules, they keep changing.
So some of the trivia I have for this is interesting. So ironically, if Rimmer was successful in changing his timeline as he had intended, the Cadmium 2 radiation leak would never have happened, as the drive plate would have been fitted properly. The cat race would never have existed, and Crichton would be trapped on the Nova 5, and Lister would have lived a relatively normal life regardless of what happened. Also, the Timeslides would never have existed, which meant that they couldn't go back in time to alter history in the first place, creating a paradox.
Which this show will do a few times.
Okay. And then also another bit was Lister tries to change his life by asking his 17-year-old self to become the inventor of the tension sheet. Rimmer says that he went to school with the person who invented it originally, Fred Thicky Holden, and that he was a millionaire at 26. Given the age gap between Rimmer and Lister, Holden would have already invented the tension sheet by the time Lister was 17.
Oh, yeah.
You're not supposed to read these things too much, are you?
The math doesn't quite math. Well, luckily they don't. Yeah, they don't throw out dates and stuff.
No.
I also love it's 2077, but like when you go to Rimmer's boarding school, it might as well be 1978. Yeah, not even like, it's so funny. And even like when they show his parents and stuff, or it looks so much older than it's supposed to be. As opposed to like Back to the Future, who's like, it's 2015. We got to make the coats have got to have a weird collar and stuff like that.
It looks like it reminds me of. So it's something you would see from the boarding rooms in the section of Monty Python's The Meaning of Life when they're at the boarding school. It's that like all wood paneled rooms, and that's what it feels like.
It's an odd thing that I would love to know the story behind, because it must be something that somebody experienced.
Maybe.
But boy, Rimmer waking up wearing boxing gloves.
I love how he says, I've got to do rugby practice in the morning because of my being so wet.
Yeah. He's like, you should write that down. It might help if you take the boxing gloves off.
Yeah.
Like, it's just, I don't know. It's so weird. I just friggin' love it. I did not catch when he comes back from Thicky Holden's until the second viewing, because I was watching it, that it literally, the second the Red Dwarf crew appears, his H is gone.
See, I never noticed that. It's interesting because it's one of those episodes. I wish I could go back to the first time I ever watched it to see if I'd noticed that. Because you think you would notice it, because it's a big part of who Rimmer is, and it's not like it's literally front and center in his forehead, and yet.
And it's there, then it's a wide shot of the group appearing, and then it cuts back to Rimmer saying something, and it's gone. And I was like, man, it really was. I did not notice it until he does, And
obviously, it's Holly that pointed out, and she don't ask me how, but it seems like you're now alive.
So is this a world where Rimmer got into stasis as well, and with never a hologram?
In the trivia, it says it's theorized that Rimmer's encounter with himself aged 8, the version of himself from 3 weeks before the radiation leak, was less disturbed by his encounter with his future self. And so he listened to his future self's advice and put himself into stasis, which is why he was alive by the end of this episode, which makes perfect sense because he was so shocked when he met his future self in that, whereas he'd already had an encounter. So that time in stasis leak, he'd be like, all right, this obviously is a thing, so maybe it's true. Maybe I should listen to him. I'm going to go into stasis, and I'm alive now.
But that now means that Kat and they all have a memory that Rimmer was never a hologram, and now all of a sudden he's going to be a hologram?
Yeah, it's funny, right? Tracy said that when we were watching it. She said that.
So what about the adventures they had where he stole Rimmer's body, or Lister's body, I mean, and like... that wouldn't have happened. Like, again, I don't think these are things.
No, it's true, but the only person that would remember. But then, see, this is where time travel comes in. Surely, would Rimmer's mind change based off the fact that his past was different? So maybe at that split second he remembered everything that had happened previously, and then suddenly something happens. Like the butterfly. Have you seen the butterfly effect with Ashton Kutcher? So effectively like that his brain would reshape itself to accommodate the new memories rather than the old ones.
Which means, did anything happen like we experienced it? Because so many things are based on the fact he is a hologram. Again, I don't think this is stuff they thought of at all. But they would never think that we'd all be sitting back watching these and going, well, in season 4.
Yeah, exactly. It was really good. Yeah, it was a good episode. Again, I enjoyed it. First episode was like definitely back on form. Definitely feels like it's in line with the first couple of seasons.
Maroon is a standout, I think, having gone through this. Yeah.
And then the next one I feel like is very much the same. And then I watched it the second time and I was like, yeah. And then the third viewing, I was like, it's set up. Joke with Lister in his mansion, and then end. Just seems to end.
Yeah. It's funny seeing Lister's mansion, and of course he's still himself, so he's kind of a slob about it, and
his servant absolutely hates him because he feels he's like a tool.
Speaking of really good delivery from Chris Berry, though, I also love his delivery where he bites that sandwich and is like, Crichton!
Yeah.
Get the puncture repair kit for the love doll. His delivery is so genuine. But I remember as a kid not understanding why he died, hitting the boxes. And boy, they only for a split second show that shot so you can read that those boxes say explosives. Okay, but I think you have to be looking for it on a subsequent viewing because it's like such a quick shot, down, boom. You do not read that explosives on
I think he's just accepted on it. It's funny, one thing Tracy commented on, and I was like, we had a bit of a disagreement over it watching it last night, because as far as kind of off the back of what you said, that Kat, Lister and Crichton now only have a memory of Rimmer being a real person. And so when he blows up, the more I'm starting to talk about this, the more I'm coming round to her way of thinking. When he blows up, their reaction is just like, that's it. Like, one of their crew members has just blown himself up, and they're like, oh, okay.
What did he say? Yeah, it's like they remember him being a hologram still.
It's weird, odd.
As opposed to like, what? Yeah.
And I was just like, it's just because it's Rimmer. They can't stand him, so they're not that bothered. And she's like, I don't care how much you hate someone. One of your crewmates is just blown up. You'd have more of a reaction than, what was that? Oh, whatever.
Yeah, it's definitely predicated on the fact that they know that we know he's supposed to be a hologram.
Yeah.
Which is odd. Again, it's like the time turner. Don't think about it too much.
Exactly.
Everything starts to fall apart.
I struggled with giving... So I sat last night and I'm like, it was all right. I really enjoyed the first two viewings, and the third viewing was like... Ugh. And I was going to give it a 6. And I was like, that seems really harsh. But it goes off what we already said. 6 is better than all right. But I feel like it was harsh. And especially off the back of it feeling like it was getting back into what Red Dwarf should be. So I gave it a 7 in the end.
Well, see, that's where I was at. 6 felt too harsh and 8 felt too good. And I thought, it's a 7 because I did enjoy it. It was a nice jump back after the previous one. That, again, I don't think it was a bad one. It just was, listen to the last episode. You'll hear everything we had to say about that.
Yeah, that's what a bad one looks like.
It's like, you know what? If you've got 6 episodes and most of them are hitting for you, this is fine.
Yeah.
I love the concept.
Yeah. Yes.
And you were right. It did bring up, no, sorry. It's not this episode. You thought a thing was brought up in this episode, and I agreed with you, but it turned out.
Yes.
It was the next episode.
It was, you're right. Yes, I remember. And as soon as I know what you're talking about now. Yeah, I thought it was this one. It's not. No.
Spoilers. We'll get to that one. You'll have to wait till tune in 2 weeks.
Yes.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I guess that's going to wrap up the podcast. Again, don't forget to follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Dwarf Memory and Twitter at Dwarf_Memory for all show updates. I'm guessing everyone's defecting onto Blue Sky, so maybe I'll set up a Blue Sky account as well.
I was going to ask you if you wanted me to, because I just made one for the Brutal Game, and I got to be honest, we're getting very good engagement thus far out of it. So I'm enjoying
I've got
the Blue
one
Sky.
for my other podcast, but I haven't really used it yet. But yeah, okay.
It's been fun so far. So please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you can, and email us your comments to dwarfmemory@gmail.com. The next episode, which we've just alluded to, we'll be discussing, is Series 3, Episode 6, The Last Day. So make sure to watch before you join us for the next episode.
I can't believe this is the last episode of Season 3. We seem to be, flying.
I know. Tearing through them. Why does nothing ever go right for me? Every time I get so much as a snifter of a break, a glimpse of a shadow of happiness, something inexplicably cruel and horrible happens and it all blows up in my face.
Hang on a mo. Something's different. Don't ask me why, but somehow you're no longer a hologram. You're alive.
What? I'm alive? I'm alive! Lee, unpack Rachel and get out the puncture repair kit. I'm alive! I'm alive. I can touch. I can feel. I can fondle. I'm alive! Don't you think that's incredible? I am alive!
What were you saying?